Coming up on Colonial Crossfire, America's deadly shootings, indictments handed down in the Russia investigation, and sex abuse allegations against a Senate candidate. Joining us on the left, Drew Donaher. And on the right, Tom Crean. And I'm your moderator, Casey Decker. This is Colonial Crossfire. In modern history, America has suffered exactly 5 mass shootings with more than 25 victims. 2 of those have happened in the past 2 months. The response, much the same as mass shootings in the past. Calls for gun control from the left, and from the right, the argument that that's not the answer. Here to discuss all of that and more, our student panel. On the left, Drew Donaher, a senior from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, majoring in international affairs and minoring in political science, and interning on the Hill for a Democratic senator. And on the right, Tom Crean, a sophomore from Southold, New York, studying political science and philosophy. Tom is also the campus activism director for the GW College Republicans. Thanks so much to both of you for joining us.
Thanks, Casey.
2 of those shootings, one at a Las Vegas concert and one in a small town church in Texas, took a combined 85 lives. Tom, should the government take action to prevent mass shootings in the future?
Well, Casey, certainly the government should take action. I mean, the bump stock ban has been proposed and supported by the NRA, but it's not the answer for an all-out gun grab as some on the left have proposed.
Now, unfortunately for Tom, I'm not here to endorse an entire gun grab, as he said. And as mentioned, I'm very encouraged by the moves that Senator Corker has made and some of his colleagues in writing a letter to the ATF asking to revisit the issue of the gun bump stock.
So you mentioned bump stocks as well. The NRA at first said they would be interested in examining a ban on that. They later kind of walked that back a little bit, saying, well, we're just interested in examining that. And so far, there hasn't been any firm action taken. Do you support immediate action to ban bump stocks, which, for those who don't know, allow semi-automatic weapons to fire much faster than they otherwise would?
I'd be open to a bump stock ban, mainly for the reason that automatic weapons are mostly banned for civilian ownership. So it's kind of doing they say it makes a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon, so we're kind of doing what we already have. So I would definitely support that.
Drew, what's your #1 priority in terms of legislative reform to gun control?
My #1 priority in terms of legislative reform would be to help enact current laws and help make sure that they run as effectively and efficiently as possible. The man that committed the attack in Sutherland Springs never should have been able to get a gun, and that fell through the system, and that's something that we cannot afford to have happen.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. I do want to ask you, though, you mentioned you're not in favor of confiscating guns. Now, an argument that you often hear from those in favor of gun control is that countries abroad with much tighter restrictions have fewer mass shootings. Those countries also have less than a third, usually, of the gun per capita ownership of the United States. Is effective gun control possible without a confiscation?
I think so, absolutely. I'm from Pennsylvania, and it's a pretty purple state. It actually went red in the last election, as we've seen, so it's a very complicated state. The school district where I'm from actually has off the Monday after Thanksgiving, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. The reason being is that's actually the first day of hunting season for certain types of deer. Teachers, postal workers, anywhere you go, small business owners, they're all avid hunters. That's something that, it's a part of American life that I don't think that we should take every gun away, but I definitely think that it's something to look into, especially an assault rifle ban, potentially.
Tom, in your opinion, has the government's response so far and the president's response so far to these 2 mass shootings been sufficient?
I think so. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do in tragedies like the Texas church shooting, which unfortunately was just an incredibly soft target. Luckily, there was an armed responder who was able to combat that, so the good guy with a gun situation is a very real one.
And we're going to talk about that right now. In fact, in that attack, as you said, an armed citizen reportedly helped take down the shooter. He was right nearby and he had a gun himself. So here's the president speaking on that issue.
If you did what you're suggesting, there would have been no difference 3 days ago, and you might not have had that very brave person who happened to have a gun or a rifle in his truck go out and shoot him and hit him and neutralize him.
Drew, in your view, do these events support the mantra that the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun?
Well, first of all, I'd say that the idea of a good guy with a gun is well-founded. Absolutely. I don't think that there's any question in that. I think the more important thing is that, if we're judging the success of this by the tragic death of these 26 individuals and the injuring of many, many more, I don't think that it's a reasonable explanation.
And now another issue with this shooting was, as you talked about before, the fact that the shooter had been bad conduct discharged from the Air Force for domestic abuse, but that information didn't make its way to the proper people, and so he was allowed to purchase a gun. So from that sequence of events, Tom, what's your biggest takeaway from that?
My biggest takeaway is we need to make sure the government's enforcing the laws we already have. I mean, I'm sure both Drew and I agree on the fact that domestic abuse felons should not be able to own firearms, and that is on the books. It just wasn't being properly enforced. So we need to make sure we really enforce what we already have.
Drew, do you agree?
Absolutely. The San Bernardino shooter, the Orlando shooter, all those instances, and now Sutherland Spring, they all had histories, including the attacker, the GOP baseball practice. They all had histories of domestic violence. So that's absolutely something that we need to avoid in the future.
Is that something that should be a priority over passing new legislation?
I absolutely think that enacting current legislation is definitely more important than enacting any kind of new legislation. But I think in order for that current legislation to be met, it needs to be doubled down on with new legislation.
In a similar aspect, the fact that he was a domestic abuser, those people are not allowed to buy guns under federal law. So but there is often a loophole just because of the way the Air Force and other military divisions report domestic abuse to the relevant authorities. There's now a bill in Congress aimed at closing that loophole and reforming the way the Air Force reports these crimes. I know that's a lot of information,
Yeah.
but simply put, should a new legislation be passed to close some of these loopholes, and does that kind of action need to be taken?
I'd have to look at the specific legislation because I'm not going to commit to anything without having read it, but I'd definitely be open to eliminating any loopholes that let people get around following current laws.
And finally, many people noted that President Trump seemed eager to stop terrorist attacks with government action, but he seems hesitant to do anything directly about mass shootings. So, Tom, is the president being hypocritical there?
I don't think he is. I think both sides, to a degree, are guilty of politicizing tragedy. The difference is with a lot of Trump's rhetoric, it's been very harsh on immigration and specifically, illegal immigration or immigration from certain areas in the Middle East. So I think it's following with his platform, and I don't think it's necessarily hypocritical because everybody's doing it. But I would definitely agree with him on tightening up on immigration.
Drew, similar question to you. On the other side, Democrats have taken some flack for, after mass shootings, instantly calling for action, but then after terrorist attacks saying we shouldn't politicize tragedies. So is there hypocrisy on the other side as well?
Well, what I would definitely look at is the thoughts and prayers argument that has recently surfaced, that Democrats are saying thoughts and prayers aren't enough. I think that also kind of misinterprets what the thoughts and prayers are intended to do. A lot of times that it's used to express grievance and stand in solidarity with those affected by this, on all Americans on that front. At the same time, I think it would also be disingenuous then to not act upon those. And I think another argument is that if immediately after a gun shooting is not the time to discuss it, let things cool over, then when is the next time? Because then by the next time we let it go by the wayside, the next shooting has happened. So I definitely think that there is hypocrisy on both sides, but the more important thing would be to come together to try to find some solution.
All right, we're gonna have to wrap up our discussion there. Thank you guys both for that. But don't go away right now, because when we come back, key Trump campaign staffers under arrest in the Russia investigation. We'll discuss next.
The George Washington University, at the intersection of policy, practice, and research. Connecting all that Washington has to offer with an intellectual environment that drives progress. Transforming vision into action, offering learning experiences that are rigorous, real-time, and real-world. In a city shaping the future, George Washington is a place where faculty and students don't just study the world, they work to change it.
I believe. I believe that. I believe that we. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win.
back now and moving to another issue with huge developments on multiple fronts in recent weeks, the Russia investigation. First, the president's former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, facing numerous charges from special counsel Robert Mueller, ranging from money laundering to failing to register as a foreign agent. Alongside him, 2 others with Trump campaign ties facing Russia-related charges. But the White House insisting the president himself is still in the clear. Take a look.
Today's announcement has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with the president's campaign or campaign activity. The real collusion scandal, as we've said several times before, has everything to do with the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS, and Russia.
First question goes to you, Drew. Do you buy this argument that the alleged crimes are too distant from the president to indicate that he might be guilty as well?
Personally, I think that what happens, in the president's name, I think that he is also accountable for. I think there might be, a possibility of him not having known what was going on. At the same time, I don't know if he can declare either not knowing or, that was just poor handling of the campaign on his part, because it is his campaign, is under his name. I think the indictment of Mr. Papadopoulos shows just how far the Mueller investigation has been going and how serious it has become.
Well, I actually disagree that it would be under Trump's purview there, because Manafort has been known to have dealings in the Ukraine and Russia long before he ever worked on the Trump campaign. But no one that hired him knew of this. So was it a mistake to hire him? Yes, in the first place it was a mistake. But does that make Trump guilty of the collusion that Manafort took part in? No, obviously not.
Is it fair, though, for the president to try to distance himself from someone who was so high up in his campaign?
I think the campaign should definitely admit that they were wrong in hiring him, but they did nothing illegal, which is a huge difference.
To each of you, first to Drew then, what else do you expect this investigation might find?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure that we now could have foreseen where we would be back, almost exactly a year ago today. The one thing that I would say to Democrats is let this play out. Let the investigation play out how it will. Let Robert Mueller do his job, and then we'll go from there.
Tom, do you expect more advances in this investigation?
I expect it to eventually bubble out and just kind of end, because I think Democrats have overhyped the whole Russia thing. I mean, just days before the election, they were assuring us that the election cannot be hacked and that Donald Trump is just losing. But as soon as he wins, now the election was definitely hacked. So there is some sort of cognitive dissonance there.
Do you believe that these indictments, though, show that this investigation might be not all smoke and no fire?
I think these indictments show that there are shady people in America that have been dealing with the Russian government and with the Kremlin in the past, but I don't think that necessarily connects to the political scene of the Trump campaign.
Drew, do you think that Robert Mueller needs more protection from potentially being fired, or do you think he's in a safe place right now?
I sincerely hope he's in a safe place. I don't think we've kind of underestimated Trump's miscalculations in the past. So I don't think that him trying to fire Robert Mueller is out of the question. And I would definitely like to see some either legislation in Congress protecting the special prosecutor.
Tom, do you believe the president might try to fire Robert Mueller?
I don't think he will at this point, just because that would look incredibly bad. So I couldn't see it happening.
Do you think legislation should be passed to make sure that it can't happen?
I don't think legislation needs to be passed. I mean, he hasn't taken moves to remove Mueller yet, and I don't think any president in the past has, and you don't want to close that possibility in case there is a situation in the future with some sort of corrupt special counsel. So you don't want to completely close that legislatively.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Drew, this has been a very complicated thing altogether, the Russian investigation. Another development, a report from the Washington Post revealed the DNC in the Clinton campaign paid an opposition research firm to investigate Trump. That firm later released what became a pretty famous dossier of salacious and unsolicited, or rather unsubstantiated information about Trump. Now, several high-level Democrats have previously denied their involvement in funding the research that went behind that dossier. How does this reflect on your party?
Absolutely. I think the lack of transparency in any situation, whether it's from the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, is of serious concern. I think they didn't want to look bad, and I I don't think that that's necessarily appropriate if people actually were involved with it. The other thing I'd say is that this was a private company that went through with this investigation. It's not a part of politics that I'm particularly fond of, but at the same time, the investigation now is with the collusion with a foreign adversary. So I think that's a significantly different story.
In that statement we played from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she also mentioned that she thought the real problem was this information with the DNC and this opposition research firm. Do you think it's fair for the White House to try to spin this as something that everyone was involved in?
Well, I think it's a huge problem what the DNC was involved in. If you look at what Donna Brazil's been saying in her new book and in the media, she's been pointing out how there's been a massive amount of corruption in how they treated the primaries. So I don't think the DNC is an honest organization at all. And I think that would definitely be something worth looking into, because you got to follow the money and see where it goes there.
Drew, you look like you have a response to that.
I would love to follow the money and see where it goes with President Trump's tax returns. But unfortunately, I think the dossier was called for because we don't have any information about him. We don't know his past business dealings. The only thing we have is to take him at his word. And honestly, that's something that we have seen we cannot trust.
We're going to fit in just one more quick question. Yet another development in the Russia investigation. Major tech companies, Facebook, Twitter, Google, called to testify before Congress because it was revealed that Russia and Russian government agencies purchased ads on their platforms that were intended to create divisive rhetoric in America. So, first of all, Tom, I'll ask you, do these companies owe more to the American people to make sure that they know who's buying ads on their platforms?
Well, as a supporter in the free market, I think the companies can do what they want, but I think the American people would certainly want them to tighten that up. So if they want to be accountable to their shareholders and truly show their customers that they care, then they should definitely make sure they're not letting these divisive ads through, especially if they're sponsored by foreign governments. So I think the solution is leaving it to the companies.
Drew, same question to you.
I would also say that the onus is also on the American people to determine what is true and what is not. And this is both on the left and the right. I think both groups fall victim to fake news.
All right, that'll have to be the last word on that. But after this break, it's rapid fire, so stay with us.
It's on us
to stand up to those who tell us it's not our business.
to tell our friends if what they're doing is wrong.
It's on us
to do something, anything, to keep an assault from happening.
to be more than a bystander.
To create an environment where women feel and are safe.
It's on us
to change the way we talk about women.
to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
It's on us.
To say something when our friends are being stupid.
To hold our friends accountable for their actions.
It's on us.
To look out for someone who's had too much to drink.
To step in if a friend is doing something that could lead to sexual assault.
It's on us.
To not give our friends a pass.
To never blame the victim.
To stop a sexual assault any way we can.
I am a member of the George Washington University community, and it's on us to end sexual violence.
Our panel joins us again now for rapid fire. Some quick answers to some quick questions. A new governor elected in Virginia. Democrat and current Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam cruised to victory on Election Day, defeating former RNC head Ed Gillespie by almost 9 points. In fact, Democrats across the state shattered expectations, turning out in droves and flipping over a dozen House of Delegates seats blue. Drew, what does this showing mean for Democrats in the 2018 midterms?
Well, I would say Tuesday was very exciting across the country. People of color, women, the LGBTQIA community gaining representation in various state legislatures. Very exciting. But the one thing for 2018 I would say is to Democrats, make sure we stay on the ball, stay on the issues that matter, the real bread and butter issues, while holding Congress and the Trump administration accountable. Make sure that issues affecting everyday Americans are really addressed. And I think 2018 could definitely be a good year for the Democrats.
Tom, what does this big day for Democrats mean for the future of the Republican Party?
Well, I don't think it was an astoundingly huge day for Democrats, because if you look at the counties for the 2016 election, the state of Virginia went more or less how they did for Hillary Clinton, so nothing changed there much. And I'd also like to point out how Ed Gillespie lost a lot of support because he wouldn't fully embrace the Trump agenda, which definitely hurt him, because the Trump agenda is what enthused so many voters in 2016.
Moving on to our second question now. We discussed 2 mass shootings earlier in the show, but there was yet another deadly event in this country in just the last month. In New York City, an ISIS-affiliated terrorist mowing down civilians with a pickup truck, killing 8. The president responded by calling once more for, quote, extreme vetting of immigrants. He has claimed his ban on travel to the U.S. from certain countries will prevent these sorts of attacks. But the attacker was from Uzbekistan, a country not included in the travel ban. So, Tom, is this evidence that the travel ban is not effectively combating terrorism?
Well, the travel ban, I believe, is helping, but this was, I believe the immigrant from Uzbekistan came in through the lottery system, so I definitely think that this is evidence that we should look into more aspects of even legal immigration here, and perhaps tighter vetting on that lottery system immigration process. But the immigration ban, I do believe, is helping.
Drew, your response.
Not only is the ban unconstitutional, as declared by several state courts and is now being held over in the Supreme Court, but I think we've shown that it is going to be, and it has been, ineffective. I don't think that it's really helped the United States world image as a world leader in caring for populations.
Next, Republican candidate for Senate in Alabama, Judge Roy Moore, accused of initiating sexual contact with underage girls in the late 1970s. Many prominent Republicans, including Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, have called for Moore to drop out of the race if the allegations are true. So, Tom, do you think Moore is a fit person to be a United States Senator?
I don't think he was fit before this. I mean, I supported Luther Strange in the primaries just for the fact that Roy Moore has called for the homosexuality to be made illegal, which I think is definitely not appropriate for a United States Senator. So I just think this is piling on to what we already knew about Roy Moore, that he's not a great guy.
Drew, what do you think should happen with Roy Moore?
I really respect Tom's answer, and I really agree with Tom's answer. At the same time, this issue of sexual assault, rape allegations, sexual misconduct, all these things that have been piling up over the past year or 2 years shows a larger picture. And I think if both Democrats and Republicans can't come to terms with members of their own party, it's not a political issue. It's an issue with men. I think it's an issue with men engaging in these activities. And until Democrats can both say, oh, well, that's just who this person is, or people, I would say on the right, excusing people of certain actions, until both parties can come to terms with that, I don't think there's any moving forward from that point.
And finally today, a new threat of war in the Middle East. Regional powers Iran and Saudi Arabia battling for influence in Lebanon. The Prime Minister of Lebanon on a trip to Saudi Arabia suddenly resigning. Now, many in Lebanon accusing the Saudis of forcing him to quit, meddling in their affairs. And Saudi Arabia ordering all of its citizens to evacuate Lebanon. Drew, should the U.S. take sides in this conflict?
I think we need more clarification on the United States' involvement in the Yemen conflict on the side of, currently we're helping the Saudi Arabians. Right now, I don't think we can get bogged down in another quagmire in the Middle East, but I do think that it is very dangerous to see what the Crown Prince has been doing. I think that's interesting to look at. And then also seeing the slight liberalization of policies regarding women going to sporting events or being able to drive. Those are encouraging, but at the same time, I am a little worried about that.
Tom, should the U.S. be involved with Saudi Arabia and Lebanon?
Absolutely not. The American people are tired of spending tax dollars on wars that have no nexus to the United States, and I think some of that frustration is what we saw with Trump's election, because he had a very non-interventionist policy when it comes to conflicts not involving the United States.
And with that, we wrap up our debate here on Colonial Crossfire. Tom Crean, Drew Donaher, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks.
When we come back, Alex Snyder has our debate fact check.
Nearly 16 million people visit Washington, D.C. every year. Some come to witness, some to be heard. We come to make an impact, to learn from leaders, and to lead others. To create and create change. We are the George Washington University. We come to make history.
Raise high. This isn't just our battle cry. It's our call, our challenge. Because when you are called to Washington, you are called to higher expectations, to a higher standard. We are called here to advance knowledge, to serve society, to change the world. This is the George Washington University, and what we make is history. So stand up, be bold, take risks, press on, push harder, raise high.
Welcome back. During our panel discussion, a team of fact-checkers monitored our debate. Alex Snyder is here now to fill us in on what we missed. Alec?
Thanks, Casey.
Today's debaters certainly knew their facts and backed up their arguments with reliable information. However, there were a few moments where the debaters may have overstated things a bit. One point Tom made that needs a closer look was his comparison of Hillary Clinton and Ralph Northam's county vote results in Virginia. Although most Virginia counties voted the same way, Virginia Beach and Chesapeake counties both went for President Trump last year, but turned blue for Northam in this year's gubernatorial election. And Tom mentioned that President Trump's travel ban has been helping the United States. This is false because the travel ban has still not taken effect yet. Federal courts in both Maryland and Hawaii blocked the latest version, but the White House challenged these blocks. The ban's fate will go before an appeals court in December. That's all for this edition of Colonial Crossfire Fact Check. I'm Alex Snyder. Casey?
Thanks, Alec. And now for Spilled Milk, here's our tribute to the very best of late-night political comedy.
Today, my love has gone away. The bottle stands so long, a symbol of the dawn.
Trump may well be the first ever troll to be elected president. And that's right, I said elected. Remember 10th president, Sprinkles Fuzz Wizard? He assumed office after William Henry Harrison died. And if you're thinking, hold on, Sprinkles Fuzz Wizard was not America's 10th president, really? Who was America's 10th president? Exactly. Let's assume I'm right.
You hear about this at a rally today? Roy Moore's wife, Kayla, said Trump should thank him for distracting people from Russia. Then she thanked Al Franken for distracting people from her husband.
Turns out Donna Brazile, also a big liar.
She just is unbelievably arrogant and has the deadest eyes I think I've ever seen.
That's right. She has the deadest eyes he's ever seen. And you know Jones has seen a dead body before.
Peter McConnell, do you think these women make on-the-record accusations against Roy Moore, sir? Thank you, Let's go, guys.
Can they see me if I don't move? They're reporters, Mitch, not T-Rexes.
All right, well, that's it for this episode of Colonial Crossfire. For all the latest updates from our political team at any time, be sure to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. And check us out online at www.gw-tv.com. For all of us here at GWTV, I'm Casey Decker. Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us. We'll see you right back here next time.